Welcome back, everyone. We will now hear from our final set of speakers for today, and then you will have the opportunity again to ask your questions in another panel discussion. Please feel free to send your questions via the chat box during the presentations. Our first speaker is Brian Hasselbeck, Deputy Director of the Office of Policy for Pharmaceutical Quality. Brian began his career 31 years ago inspecting drug manufacturing operations before joining CDER in the Office of Compliance, where he handled enforcement actions and related policies before joining OPQ in 2015. We will then hear from Francis Godwin, who has served in various functions within compliance and is currently the Director of the Office of Manufacturing Quality, overseeing regulatory and enforcement actions for both foreign and domestic drug CGMP cases. Our third speaker, Dr. Jennifer Maguire, is the Director of OPQ's Office of Quality Surveillance. This office assesses intelligence throughout the drug product life cycle to inform stakeholders about the state of pharmaceutical quality and uses data analytics to drive surveillance decisions. During her tenure at the agency, Dr. Maguire has contributed to multiple initiatives aimed at advancing the regulation of pharmaceutical manufacturing and product quality, including question-based review, quality by design, ICH Q12, site selection model program, quality metrics, and quality management maturity. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
Thank you for that introduction. I served at FDA for over 31 years now, and before FDA I was a volunteer in the Peace Corps. And that experience inspired my interest in global cooperation, and so it is my pleasure to be discussing this topic with you today. In this presentation, I'll address two basic questions. What are we doing to harmonize internationally that impacts the quality of drugs for human use? I'll provide a basic review of the kinds of arrangements and collaborations we currently have internationally and related to quality. I'll then address the question of whether and in what way those relationships have made a difference in our regulation of drug quality. I thought it would be more impactful if I explained how by reference to a real world and ongoing public health problem. More about that later. I'll introduce our major partners and arrangements, and then overview some current activities related to drug quality. ICH, or the International Council for the Harmonization of Technical Requirements for Pharmaceuticals for Human Use, is the arrangement where we spend more effort than any other, and for good reason, because it's at ICH that we collaborate with a diverse array of partners and stakeholders to establish harmonized expectations that ensure a level playing field with respect to safety, efficacy, and of course, quality. ICH also sponsors training of their guidelines. The guidelines establish expectations that are applicable to both regulated entities and regulatory members of ICH. The Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme, which FDA joined in 2011 following a robust audit of our regulatory system, also maintains guidelines related to pharmaceutical quality and fosters harmonized inspection behavior by conducting joint training and by developing inspection guidelines, which it calls aid memoirs. FDA's drug quality mutual recognition agreements currently cover inspections of manufacturing facilities, including routine inspections of manufacturing and those done to evaluate facilities involved in the manufacturing for marketing applications being assessed. The International Coalition of Medicines Regulatory Authorities, or ICMRA, is a more recent organization among leaders of many national regulatory authorities. The World Health Organization is another key partner in drug quality, and I'll talk more about that in a bit. And finally, FDA engages with a few other partners on a bilateral or regional or multilateral basis. So our regulatory partners can be divided into those that involve regulated industry like ICH, and those that are by and among regulators. I'll next dive into some details about what we're currently doing with these same partners. Let's begin with ICH. The more recent activity at ICH in quality includes a diverse set of topics, beginning with Q12 on lifecycle management, which is now being implemented. In development are a guideline on continuous manufacturing, Q13, and development of a new guidance, Q14, on analytical procedure development, and a revision to Q12 on analytical validation. In the design stage is an update to M4Q that would, among other things, lead to more structured submissions to improve organization and the accessibility of content. And the ICH Quality Discussion Group has wrapped up its latest meeting cycle after reviewing all quality-related guidelines as well as many new proposed topics. The QDG issued a comprehensive set of recommendations to the ICH Management Committee, which includes a proposal to modernize the ICH Stability Guides, Q1 series and 5C, as well as Q6A and Q6B, which covers tests and acceptance criteria for pharmaceuticals, including biologicals. The QDG considered many other proposals for new topics and updates and ranked them by priority. While Q12 and M4Q are about application filings, Q13, Q14, Q2, as well as most other ICH guidance, are relevant to drug manufacturers who aren't subject to a pre-market review of an application. We recommend that all manufacturers, including those manufacturing non-application drugs, read and follow ICH guidelines in addition, of course, to the guidelines that FDA publishes concerning drug quality. PICS. There are now 54 member countries in PICS, and as I noted, FDA was accepted in 2011. The quote you see on the slide is taken from PICS's mission statement, and while PICS maintains CGMP standards, its real interest and value to FDA is the joint training opportunity for inspectors and the sharing of inspection information and other drug quality information like alert notifications concerning recalls and defects. A current focus of PICS is the development of a guideline governing what are tentatively called distant assessments, which FDA refers to as remote interactive evaluations and remote record reviews. Mri Partnerships. FDA is authorized by statute at Section 809 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act to enter into arrangements with foreign counterparts for the purpose of recognizing inspections of foreign manufacturing establishments and to use that information for risk-based scheduling, for evidence of compliance with CGMPs, and for other purposes deemed necessary. Another statutory element is that we can only rely on a foreign counterpart's inspections once we've assessed that a regulatory system is capable of conducting inspections that meet the applicable requirements of the Act. We've completed our assessments of both the UK and the 27 countries of the EU, and we're now able to rely on most surveillance type inspections performed. And because of travel limitations over the past year and a half, we've also recently assessed and found some partnering countries capable of performing inspections in third countries and can rely on that inspection information in deciding compliance status of a human drug manufacturing facility. And while the MRAs permit us to rely on pre-approval and pre-licensing inspections, we've had to temporarily suspend our mutual assessment activity in this area. So which country is next? I don't know. We'll see once we can begin traveling for purposes other than inspections. ICMRA is a consortium of drug regulatory authorities, with each authority represented by a senior leader, and is thus able to accomplish its mission of strategic coordination and to advocate for alignment on those challenges confronting international harmonization. A key focus is on fostering information sharing and greater transparency by and among drug regulatory authorities. Note that ICMRA's scope includes all areas of pharmaceutical regulation and not just quality. It currently has 36 members and associate members representing nations from all regions. Some recent developments related to pharmaceutical quality include a June 2021 statement expressing interest on the importance of further mutual regulatory reliance with a particular focus on how regulators can share information and be mutually transparent about their regulatory activities. For those interested in how regulators may further harmonize activities and become even more mutually reliant, I encourage you to read this June statement. Also, this past August, ICMA posted a horizon scanning report that discusses the use of artificial intelligence by both regulators and by those performing regulated activities. ICMA is hosting further discussions on this topic. ICMA is also preparing a reflections paper for PICS use on the topic of remote evaluations. WHO. The World Health Organization performed some direct assessments of drug manufacturing in support of UN purchases for humanitarian relief. However, the major areas of collaboration by FDA with WHO are on reviewing technical guidelines, such as those drafted to aid WHO member countries in establishing harmonized standards and expectations governing drug quality. We also collaborated in reviewing pharmacopeal monographs through the Pharmacopeal Discussion Group, which strives to develop harmony among the compendial organizations worldwide, and who, along with its members, collaborate in responding to emerging issues arising from drug quality, including drug availability that threaten public health. FDA also has several important bilateral and multilateral arrangements. FDA and EMA, for example, have announced a formal arrangement to collaborate on applications for medically necessary drugs that will hopefully help bring them to the market sooner. FDA has also worked with the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, or APEC, to address shared supply chain challenges and provide joint training opportunities to regulated industry in the Asia-Pacific region. Similarly, we've worked also with Pan American Health Organization on various projects to promote good manufacturing practices in the Americas. And there are many other collaborations not covered by formal arrangements and aren't always announced in press releases, and these have also been extraordinarily helpful. I'd summarize these arrangements and collaborations in this way. In terms of general strategic direction about what topics and priorities are coming in the future, look to ICMA and ICH, which includes industry and many national regulatory authorities, along with observers from WHO and PICS. The very challenging work of establishing detailed quality expectations and standards is, of course, accomplished by ICH working groups and is all the more impactful given the recent influx of new members to ICH. The policies of national authorities are also influential, even outside the ICH or WHO context, because even when we're not jointly developing a new policy, we often look at what other national authorities have said about a topic as we develop a new policy. Finally, the international organization arrangements that lead to significant harmonization and norming of inspection practices are the MRAs, as well as PICS. Both arrangements entail rigorous assessments, and those assessments have identified opportunities for improvement and often have a positive norming effect on all the parties involved. I have a poll question. I'm interested in your thoughts. What other areas should FDA harmonize? Please select a response from the list A to D. Should we harmonize in the enforcement area, or routine application assessments for non-priority submission types, or enhance our collaboration sampling and testing drugs to determine conformance to specifications, or lastly, should we harmonize on the performance of inspections of manufacturing facilities as part of the application assessment process? I'm looking forward to your response. Responses, and I'll address them during the panel discussion later today. Okay, let's go back to my slides. To wrap up my presentation, I'll answer the question I asked earlier about whether these arrangements have made a real difference in regulating pharmaceutical quality. In short, yes, they have, and I'll illustrate how using a recent and ongoing area of collaboration. FDA's response to the problem of excessive nitrosamines in some drugs has taken an extraordinary amount of effort from dozens of staff in FDA, and in nearly every way our response has been aided by and been made more effective because of the arrangements and collaborations in place before the problem first surfaced in June of 2018. One of the first indications of excessive nitrosamine in a marketed drug was from an EU member state inspectorate that had received a report that corroborated other information before FDA at about the same time. That report was shared with FDA in a timely manner. That and subsequent reports of findings during inspections or from regulatory testing or from manufacturer reports sent to one national authority and then shared in turn with others have helped FDA respond to new incidents of nitrosamines in a drug, and in turn, FDA has shared similar information with our foreign counterparts. In terms of policy, we all benefited from existing ICH guidance, especially M7, which before June of 2018 had identified nitrosamine compounds as a special concern and for which was required special consideration establishing limits and a control strategy. Beyond that, FDA's guidance on nitrosamines published first in 2020 largely harmonized our timetable for corrective action with timetables that had been publicly announced by other regulators, like the EU. Although we didn't adopt certain policies of EU or other regulatory agencies, we sought to align as much as possible and reasonable given our risk assessment and priorities. Our assessment and our inspection priorities were also influenced by work being done by other regulators, just as our plans impacted their priorities and actions. In fact, some joint inspections were performed back in 2018 and 19, all because the MRA and PICS arrangements provided a basis to share that information and collaborate and coordinate those inspection events, especially notifications of newly identified risks. While FDA quickly developed and publicly shared its methods for detecting and quantifying various nitrosamines in many different drug types, behind the scenes, we held routine meetings with other regulatory labs from around the world to share lessons learned and provide useful feedback on one another's drafted testing methods and approaches. ICH connections, as well as our MRA and many bilateral partnerships, influence this work. Finally, overall, our decisions and actions to mitigate the risk from excessive nitrosamines depended on policies developed at ICH and those we developed that were influenced by various partners, including those listed here. While our responses to the nitrosamine problem has been and continues to be based on doing what we think to be in the best interest of U.S. patients and public health, we have relied on and been helped by our formal and informal collaborations with the international counterparts. I have two challenge questions. The first is, what statute authorizes FDA to engage in a mutual recognition agreement about inspections? Is it A, none, matters solely at FDA discretion, B, Section 809 of the PHS Act, C, Section 809 of the FD&C Act, or D, 21 CFR 211, the GMP regulations for finished pharmaceuticals? Now this one's a bit tricky. The correct answer is C, Section 809 of the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act. The second challenge question is, which of the following statements is not true? A, as a member, FDA is legally obligated to enforce PICS GMP guidelines. B, ICH and ICMRA provide strategic input over pharmaceutical programs and policies. C, MRAs allow FDA to share inspection-related information with partnering national regulatory authorities. Or D, PICS fosters harmonization of inspection conduct, while ICH collaborations result in policies directly impacting industry and regulators. Which is not true? The correct answer is A. While FDA is not legally obligated to enforce PICS guidelines for GMPs, we are members of PICS, and where possible strive to align with PICS guides. In closing, FDA is involved in many international arrangements, and some are among national regulatory authorities while industry participates in a critical partnership, ICH. Together, these arrangements help FDA undertake its regulatory responsibilities in the protection of public health. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Francis Godwin. I'm the Director of the Office of Manufacturing Quality in the Center for Drug Evaluation and Research. And today I'm going to talk about quality-related compliance updates and innovations. Before we begin, I just wanted to give a short disclaimer that the views and opinions that I'm expressing today are those of myself and may not necessarily represent the official policy of the Food and Drug Administration. So what am I going to talk about today? Well, first, I'm going to talk about what OMQ, or the Office of Manufacturing Quality, does. I'm going to give some updates for fiscal year 2021. I'm going to talk about some innovations in the use of alternate tools, talk about regulatory discretions, and then I'm going to wrap up by talking about things done in the hand sanitizer space. So, the Office of Manufacturing Quality, what do we do? Well, we are part of CDER's Office of Compliance, and CDER Compliance's mission is to shield patients from poor quality, unsafe, and ineffective drugs through proactive compliance strategies and risk-based enforcement action. OMQ is part of the Office of Compliance. What we primarily do is evaluate compliance with current good manufacturing practice requirements for drugs based usually on inspection reports and evidence gathered by FDA investigators. Additionally, we'll develop and implement compliance policy, and we take reg actions to protect the public from adulterated drugs in the U.S. market. Now, what do I mean by adulterated? Adulteration is a legal provision found in the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, and I've listed out all the different adulteration provisions that apply to drugs. The first one is in sanitary conditions. You can think of this as Upton Sinclair's The Jungle type scenario. 501A2B is the failure to conform with current good manufacturing practice, which is the primary adulteration tool that OMQ uses. But there are additional ones. We have 501B, where strength, quality, or purity of a drug differs from that in the official compendium, the USP. We have 501C, which is the misrepresentation of strength, typically when a drug says it's got a certain concentration, but in reality has a different concentration. It would be adulterated under 501C. 501D is mixture or substitution with another substance, which I'll talk about a little bit later. And 501J is a drug is deemed adulterated if the owner or operator delays, denies, refuses, or limits an FDA inspection. So with that in mind, what has the OMQ been up to in the fiscal year 21? So we have taken quite a few advisory and regulatory actions in the past fiscal year. We have quite a few tools in our tool belt, and looking at this pie chart, I kind of want to walk through what each of those are. You can see on the upper right, we've issued 80 warning letters detailing technical findings of adulteration in drugs to manufacturing facilities. We've conducted 34 regulatory meetings where we've met with firms to discuss issues. We've issued 43 import alerts. An import alert is a tool that FDA uses to keep drugs from overseas that are adulterated from entering the United States. And we've also issued 81 regulatory discretions, which is on the opposite spectrum of the advisory and enforcement actions. Regulatory discretion is when we work with our drug shortage staff and manufacturers to ensure a critical supply of drugs when needed. When we're looking at import alerts specifically, again, FDA takes action against foreign drugs when we find that they're adulterated, and we do live in a global supply chain. So the import alerts implemented in fiscal year 21 have been global in nature. And there are three primary import alerts that we use. In red, you'll see this one called 9932, and FDA speak. 9932 really means when a manufacturer has delayed, denied, or limited an FDA inspection. When that occurs, we will prevent those drugs from entering the United States. We have 6640, which is inadequate CGMPs when their manufacturing practices are not up to the standards under the law. And then we have this new import alert, 6678. This was actually a new import alert created during the pandemic where FDA can take action against a drug or a manufacturing facility if FDA testing finds that a drug is out of specification or adulterated, etc. And that was an innovative thing that we did during the pandemic. And let's talk about some of the innovative things that OMQ did during the pandemic when it comes to our actions and the use of what we're calling alternate tools. So to set the stage, historically, the Office of Manufacturing Quality, our actions that we took, whether it's warning letters, import alerts, etc., were primarily based on evidence collected from FDA inspections, both domestic and abroad. And during the pandemic, while FDA inspections continued, they were primarily on a mission-critical basis, and thus the number of inspections were reduced due to COVID-related safety and travel restrictions. However, FDA utilized alternate tools in order to protect the public health from unsafe or adulterated drugs. In the Office of Manufacturing Quality, we utilized multiple alternates to take action against poor quality drugs. This included import sampling. It can be from imports, but we also use domestic sampling. We also used inspection reports from our colleagues under the Mutual Recognition Agreement, where a foreign regulator would have inspected someone and we can use that information to take an action against them if we find egregious findings. And we also used what are called 704A4 records requests. This is a formal mechanism that started in FDASIA, which was passed in 2012, that allows FDA to formally request records. And if there are findings from these record requests that support adulteration, OMQ can and has been able to take action both on the CGMP side, but also for firms that refuse to provide records pursuant to a 704A4 request. When you look at the pandemic curtailing some inspections, you can see the resulting shift in our regulatory actions. Now, I know this graph is a little bit busy, but I want to kind of walk you through it. On the far left, you have fiscal year 2017, 2018, and 2019. And you'll notice they're kind of static, right? In blue, you have the import alerts that we've implemented based on inspections. And you can see they're kind of the primary driver, right? 28 in 17, almost 60 in 2018, 30 in 2019. But you'll also see in yellow something also that's inspection related. These are refusals of on-site inspections. And you can see that we place firms on import alert when firms refused inspections there as well. Now you notice that in FY 17, 18, and 19, there's this little orange, maybe a little bit of green at the bottom, where occasionally we would have put firms on import alert using sample results or based on refusal to provide a records request, but used very infrequently. Now, when you get to FY 20, right, this is when the pandemic began and we had to do a lot of shifting of resources. You notice there's still quite a few import alerts based on inspections in blue or refusals of inspections in yellow, but you'll see that all of a sudden FDA started using alternate tools as well, to the point that we had 45 firms that we placed on import alert on sample results alone, but we also started putting firms on import alert using records request, refusals of record request, you name it. And you can see in FY21, now all of a sudden the primary driver, the number one reason for import alert is based on sampling with the 19. So you can see as the inspection landscape shifted, OMQ shifted over when it came to import alert cases. This is more illustrated in the warning letter statistics. So this is a graph of the number of warning letters that OMQ has issued over the past 5 years. And you'll see in FY 17, 18, and 19, it's all blue, which is basically all the actions were warning letters were based on FDA inspections. And you'll see in FY20 there was this shift to start doing things with samples. And this year, we have the majority of our warning letters have been sample related. There has also been 704A4 request warning letters, and also, again, still some inspections because mission critical inspections are continuing, and we are involved in some of those. And it's interesting if you look at this graph, you'll see that in FY20 and FY21, the number of warning letters is almost identical, but where in FY20 the majority was from inspections, now we have shifted to using alternate tools. Shifting gears, I want to talk about regulatory discretions. So this is a bar graph of all of the regulatory discretions that OMQ has been involved in, starting in January of 2020 and going up through September. And we coordinate quite frequently with our counterparts in the drug shortage staff when there are issues with supply chain or quality that may impact patients, particularly when it comes to supply of drugs. And one of the things that OMQ needed to do during the pandemic, in coordination with our folks in DSS, is keep a watchful eye on the supply chain. The pandemic definitely put strain on the supply chain, but it also was exacerbated by the pandemic itself and certain drugs going in much higher demand, particularly for hospitalized COVID patients. So what you see here is if you look on the far left, you can see that there are about 5 or 6 regulatory discretions granted a month for non-COVID drugs. And then starting in April of 2020, you can see in orange the COVID-related regulatory discretions. And when I talk about COVID regulatory discretions, we're talking about drugs that are used in patients who are battling COVID, whether it be sedatives so that they can be intubated, or whether it's the oxygen they're breathing, et cetera. These are drugs that are going to directly help COVID patients in the hospitals or elsewhere. And you can see right at the beginning of the pandemic, April, May, there were quite a few reg discretions as the agency was gearing up to help bolster supply in the hospitals as the country was dealing with the first wave of the pandemic. And throughout the pandemic, as the need has arisen, we've coordinated with drug shortage staff and others to grant regulatory discretions where needed to help bolster the supply, but with the additional controls to make sure that the drugs are safe and effective. Shifting gears, I want to talk about hand sanitizers, where there's been a lot of activity throughout the pandemic. So during the pandemic, as it started up, there was an incredible increase in the demand for hand sanitizer. So much so that the traditional manufacturers did not have anywhere near the capacity to supply the market when it comes to the patient demand for hand sanitizers, consumer demand for hand sanitizers, and most importantly, healthcare personnel requirements for hand sanitizers, particularly in the hospital settings. And so as industry started jumping into the hand sanitizer production industry, FDA issued 3 guidance documents outlining some temporary policies to provide some flexibility to the firms to help meet the demand during the public health emergency. Now, while we issued the guidances early in the pandemic, we were continually assessing the needs and circumstances related to these policies, and we updated and modified the guidances throughout the pandemic as we saw things and wanted to clarify things, or if issues arose and we wanted to address them. Here are the links to the 3 hand sanitizer guidances. The first one is for compounding, so it talks about how pharmacy compounders and what they would need to do in order to compound hand sanitizers. There was a manufacturing guidance. This was a temporary policy for new manufacturers who wanted to make the finished hand sanitizers during the pandemic. And the third guidance was related to the active ingredient, which is usually ethyl alcohol for hand sanitizers. Hand sanitizers are usually comprised of at least 60%, but more typically 70 or 80% alcohol. So the demand for hand sanitizer not only caused an increase in demand for hand sanitizer, but the underlying active ingredient, ethanol, also known as alcohol. So we issued a guidance related to the production and quality standards for the alcohol to be used in hand sanitizers. Now, one of the things we did encounter during the pandemic was substitution. I mentioned one of the adulteration provisions earlier in my presentation about 501D. On the left, you have ethanol. This is an acceptable ingredient for hand sanitizer. Ethanol is also what you will find in wine, beer, spirits, what have you. You'll notice that it has 2 carbons. Those are the black spheres. On the right, you have methanol. This is a poison. And at one point during the pandemic, FDA encountered methanol substitution. What was going on is there were some actors who were selling methanol to hand sanitizer manufacturers, but they were calling it ethanol instead. We've actually seen certificates of analysis that say this material is ethyl alcohol, but in reality the material was methanol. So not a very good thing. This did result in some fatalities of U.S. citizens. And when FDA encountered substitution with methanol, the first thing that we would do is we would contact firms about taking market action to limit patient exposure. Drugs and drug products manufactured by these firms were added to Import Alert 6678. This was the new import alert I mentioned being created during the pandemic based on testing results. And warning letters were issued to the manufacturers that had manufactured alcohol-based hand sanitizers that were in fact containing methanol. And there was also continued heightened surveillance of hand sanitizers, both for imported hand sanitizer and for hand sanitizer produced domestically. I just want to point out the methanol substitution that we did encounter. We have seen it primarily overseas. We have seen it from manufacturers in Mexico. We've also seen it in India, Turkey, China, and a few other places. And anytime we encountered this, we also would put the drugs, the hand sanitizers that might be contaminated on a list that is publicly available on our website. It's a do not use list for consumers. And it basically has a list of all of the hand sanitizers that we've encountered that had problems so that purchasers or consumers can know about it and potentially not acquire or use those hand sanitizers. And while I mentioned that, we did encounter methanol substitution from various countries abroad, one thing that was kind of a shocking pattern was really what we saw in Mexico. And it ended up culminating in FDA doing something very innovative. It was the first time it's ever been done in history. We actually placed all hand sanitizer manufactured in Mexico on import alert. And I have a link to the import alert here in the slides. And what this did is this prevented these hand sanitizers from legally entering the United States. Now, why did we do this? Well, it was implemented based on the data. It was implemented because the prevalence of methanol substitution in hand sanitizer made in Mexico was quite high. In fact, 84% of samples that we analyzed from Mexico were fine violative, whether it's subpotency or substitution with methanol. It really was definitely a pattern that warranted this innovative action. And again, this is the first time FDA had used a country or area import alert for drug products. Historically, it's more commonly used in the food sector. You may hear about it every once in a while where maybe a particular produce from a certain valley that had a problem is banned because of some contamination concerns, but it had never been used for drug products before, and so that was quite innovative. More recently, FDA has updated our temporary policies regarding hand sanitizer production. So on October 12th, just a short while ago, FDA announced the withdrawal of the temporary policies related to hand sanitizer. As I mentioned before, this was the temporary policies were in response to this huge increase in demand without adequate supply. And our decision to withdraw the hand sanitizer temporary policies is also related on what information we have regarding supply and demand. We conducted some information gathering, and the decision is based on sufficient availability of supply for consumers and healthcare professionals. Based on some other interactions, we also are aware that hospital supply now typically comes from your traditional manufacturers that were operating prior to the pandemic and the temporary policies. And so therefore, FDA announced the withdrawal. And under the terms of the withdrawal, the manufacturing of hand sanitizers under the temporary policies must cease by December 31st of this year. And for any hand sanitizer that's made under the temporary policies by the end of this year, distribution from the manufacturers must occur before March 31st. And then any hand sanitizer that is manufactured after December 31st, so starting on January 1st of next year, the hand sanitizer must be fully compliant with the Act, including all CGMP requirements. So, in summary, the Office of Manufacturing Quality, we work to minimize consumer exposure to unsafe, ineffective, and poor quality drugs. And we take actions against firms with poor CGMP or where other information calls into question the quality of the drugs for the U.S. patients. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Maguire, and I'm the Director of the Office of Quality Surveillance. I'm pleased to be here today to provide an update on CDER's Quality Management Maturity Program. My talk today has two objectives. First, since Quality Management Maturity is thought of as a surveillance program, I'd like to provide a bit of context by introducing the role of the Office of Quality Surveillance. Next, I'll move into a status update on CDER's Quality Management Maturity Program and the ongoing pilots. So now a bit more about the Office of Quality Surveillance, or OQS. The Office of Quality Surveillance is one of 9 sub-offices within the Office of Pharmaceutical Quality. The vision of our office is to continuously monitor and provide the state of quality for all regulated sites and products. And our mission is to assure that quality medicines are available through signal detection, data analysis, review of the state of quality, and proactive stakeholder engagement. Now, vision and mission statements always sound great, but my next slide will talk about what this means in practice. The Office of Quality Surveillance monitors quality and manages information about CDER-regulated sites and the products that they manufacture. We use the intelligence that we collect along with analytics to make data-driven decisions that can potentially reduce risk to patients. I have on this slide 4 examples of programs within the office, and I hope that these programs will give you a flavor for the type of work that we do. The first example is the site selection model, which we maintain within the office. We use this model each fiscal year to prioritize sites for routine GMP inspections, which are then executed by the field or ORA. The next example is our human drug surveillance sampling program. In this program, we sample drugs that are manufactured domestically as well as drugs that are imported into the country to ensure that they comply with our safety and quality standards. The third example is our site engagement program. In our site engagement program, companies that manufacture drugs prone to shortage or potential supply disruptions, as well as sites that have not yet achieved sustainable compliance, engage with us voluntarily. The goal is to rectify potential quality issues early to ensure that drugs remain on the market for the patients that need them. And the final example here is the report on the state of pharmaceutical quality. In the very near future, we'll be releasing the report for fiscal year 20. This is the third consecutive year that we've released a report showcasing our surveillance research and quantitating the state of quality for industry. Our efforts are focused on proactively identifying potential quality signals and trends before serious quality problems occur. We're continuously improving our surveillance strategies by applying new techniques and methods. On the previous slide, I mentioned that we use the intelligence that we collect along with analytics to make data-driven decisions. On this slide, I'm giving some examples of the sources of intelligence within CDER that we use for surveillance purposes. So under facility and inspection data, we have access to the industry's self-reported information on registration and listings. We also have an establishment inspection report written by the investigator after every inspection is executed. Along with this, we have any issued 483s and firm responses. And then we also have other data elements like profile class codes, information on imports, business operations occurring at a particular facility, and so on and so forth. We also have access to quality defect reports. So you're aware that the regulations require field alert reports and biological product deviation reports to be submitted to the agency. We also receive a number of MedWatch reports from healthcare practitioners and consumers. On occasion, we receive consumer complaints through an avenue that's different from a FAR, BPDR, or MedWatch. Obviously, we know when products are recalled, and on occasion, we get information from informants. We also have the testing results from the drug quality sampling and testing program that I spoke about on my previous slide. And of course, we have access to all of the application data contained within original applications and supplements, as well as annual reports. In the future, we hope to take information in through our quality metrics program. I'll also, in my subsequent slides, explain the quality management maturity program and how that data will be useful. And then we have access to external data. So this data includes reports from foreign regulatory authorities that we partner with, but it also includes public information. Some of this information we purchase, and some of this information we scrape from social media, consumer reviews, blogs, news outlets, etc. So we're trying to be really comprehensive and creative with the types of data that we use to drive surveillance decisions. I included this slide to show a distinction between surveillance and enforcement. I think a lot of times industry confuses the Office of Quality Surveillance with the Office of Compliance. So the Office of Quality Surveillance actually does not take enforcement action. What we do is we continuously monitor the state of quality and we look for signals. And these signals could be positive or negative. Signals are a function of a lot of things. They can be an output from our model, they can be trending, cluster identification, but based on the severity or public health impact of these signals, a surveillance action may take place. And this surveillance action may be some type of engagement. It could be a for-cause inspection, it could be a sampling assignment, it could be an invitation into the site engagement program. But the goal of our office is to engage early with industry to help keep products on the market. If the situation at your site or company is so egregious that you're operating up here in the red, you're no longer engaging with the Office of Quality Surveillance. At that point, you're then dealing with the Office of Compliance and potential enforcement action. It's now time for our first challenge question. Which of the following statements is not a function of the Office of Quality Surveillance? Please type your answer in the chat box. Is it A, monitor quality and manage information about CDER-regulated sites and products? B, use intelligence collected and analytics to make data-driven decisions that reduce risk to patients? C, proactively identify potential quality signals and trends before serious quality problems occur? Or D, develop and implement compliance and enforcement policies and actions to protect patients from products that are produced under conditions that may pose a risk to public health? The correct answer is D. This is actually a function of the Office of Manufacturing Quality within the Office of Compliance. So I'd now like to transition to an update on CDER's Quality Management Maturity Program. I'd like to provide a little bit of context. In October of 2019, the FDA prepared a report for Congress on drug shortages, root causes, and potential solutions. This report examined underlying factors responsible for drug shortage and recommended enduring solutions. So one of the underlying factors that was identified in that report is the fact that the market does not recognize and reward manufacturers for mature quality systems that focus on continuous improvement and early detection of supply chain issues. And the enduring solution that was recommended for this root cause is to develop a rating system to incentivize drug manufacturers to invest in quality management maturity for their facilities. The program is aimed at recognizing and rewarding manufacturers for mature quality systems that achieve sustainable compliance and focus on continuous improvement, business continuity plans, and early detection of supply chain issues. Since CDER introduced its Quality Management Maturity Program, one of the most common questions we get from industry is what is the relationship between quality metrics and quality management maturity? So I hope that this slide will help answer the question. When we began our quality metrics journey, we always said that quality metrics are a key aspect of a mature pharmaceutical quality system and can reduce quality issues and drive continual improvement. But we recognized that metrics was one small piece of a much larger framework. And now we're identifying that framework as quality management maturity. So this slide shows that we consider quality management maturity an umbrella program, and there are many topic areas that fall under quality management maturity. So you can see on this slide, quality metrics is just one of those. We also introduce other topic areas like leadership commitment to quality. So in this topic area, we start to think about management review and management responsibilities, as well as aspects of rewarding staff. You'll also see that business continuity is an important topic area. This area talks about forecasting and ensuring availability and supply chain management. So this slide is illustrative, and the exact naming of these topic areas may change as our program evolves, but I hope it gives you a sense of that quality management maturity is a much larger framework than metrics alone. It's important to recognize that current good manufacturing practice, or CGMP, really establishes a minimum standard for systems that assure proper design, monitoring, and control of manufacturing processes and facilities. ICH Q10 then augments CGMP with the concept of an effective pharmaceutical quality system, or PQS. ICH Q10 covers the entire life cycle of a product and outlines activities that should be conducted to manage and continually improve the PQS. It introduces the PQS elements of process performance and product quality monitoring system, corrective action and preventative action, change management, and management review. ICH Q10 also describes how continual improvement is facilitated by the enablers knowledge management and the use of quality risk management principles. But fully realizing the 21st century pharmaceutical quality vision is going to require a transparent method of evaluating and communicating quality management maturity. The behaviors that we're measuring with quality management maturity we call above the bar behaviors. In some cases, they're behaviors that are even higher than what's detailed in ICH Q10. So quality management maturity then can be thought of as a measure of the consistency, reliability, and robustness of business processes established and maintained to achieve quality policies and objectives, including a focus on continual process and system improvement. When it comes to building a quality management maturity program, we are not starting from scratch. There are lots of ongoing efforts that we can draw from. There's the PDA Quality Culture Initiative, as well as the ISPE Advancing Pharmaceutical Quality Program. We also funded 3 years of research with the University of St. Gallen that showed that quality metric and quality culture programs make good business sense. We can also draw from the learnings of our colleagues in CDRH as they execute the Case for Quality pilot program for devices. And recently, we funded a study with Dun & Bradstreet that benchmarked the quality management practices of companies globally. Additionally, we've been conducting outreach to purchasing organizations, pharmacy chains, and other federal agencies in order to share with them the plans for our program and learn from their insights. In terms of next steps, we plan to execute 2 pilot programs that we announced last fall through the Federal Register notice, using the quality management maturity framework that we're currently developing in coordination with our third-party appraisers. We have the QMM finished dosage form pilot program, which is open to domestic manufacturers of drug products marketed in the U.S. This contract has been awarded to Pacific Force Consulting Group. We also have the QMM Active Pharmaceutical Ingredient Pilot Program, and this is open to foreign manufacturers of API used in drug products marketed in the U.S. And this contract has been awarded to Shabas Solutions. And finally, we intend, after the pilot programs, to share our learnings and seek and incorporate stakeholder input. To participate in the quality management maturity pilot programs, sites had to have acceptable compliance history. And by that, we mean that they could not have been OAI within the preceding 5 years. So when it comes to measuring and rating quality management maturity, we're talking about above the bar behaviors. So level 1 would be minimally compliant. Therefore, if you're OAI and you're not minimally compliant, you're obviously not displaying above the bar behaviors. When we think about maturity levels 2 and 3, these are sites that are displaying the principles detailed in ICH Q10, and they have an enhanced PQS. On top of that, we have maturity levels 4 and 5, where level 5 would be best in class. We anticipate that very few sites would currently be best in class, but we hope over time to drive more sites from lower levels of maturity to higher levels of maturity. As I mentioned earlier, we're currently executing 2 quality management maturity pilots. Each pilot is being handled by a different contractor. So this means that we've got assessment frameworks used for each pilot that are unique. In the domestic pilot, participants were given a self-assessment protocol that they completed independently. They then had a follow-up conversation with the contractor, so the contractor could probe the reasons why they rated themselves as they did, and the contractor also collected evidence. This evidence substantiates the ratings. The domestic tool covered 6 different program areas, and these were leadership and governance, operations, continual improvement, stakeholder engagement and satisfaction, knowledge management, and workforce engagement. Compared to the foreign tool, the domestic tool had fewer overall questions, but each of the level responses that the participant had to choose from were very detailed. The foreign pilot did not have a self-assessment component. It was executed as a facilitated virtual assessment where the company was interviewed and evidence was collected over a series of 3 to 4 days. This tool covered 4 different pillars: sustainability, risk management, compliance, and quality culture. In this tool, there were more overall questions, but each of the questions was more direct and had much simpler level responses for the participant to choose from. So as we continue the development of our program, we'll have to incorporate the best features from each of these frameworks into our final quality management maturity assessment framework. I'd like to share one additional thought on the relationship between quality management maturity and quality metrics. Quality metrics are a key aspect of a mature PQS, and using data-driven approaches can reduce quality issues and drive continual improvement. But it's important to recognize that any assessment conducted to assess a site's quality management maturity would be an evaluation at a particular point in time, in the same way that when ORA conducts an inspection, they are taking a snapshot of the site's compliance at a particular point in time. Therefore, quality metrics data would be important to provide information about the quality of the site and manufacturing process performance on an ongoing basis and in between on-site assessments. It's now time for our second challenge question. Please type your answer in the chat box. Which major root cause of drug shortages identified in the report to Congress is the impetus for a quality management maturity program? Is it A, lack of incentives to produce less profitable drugs? B, market does not recognize and reward manufacturers for mature quality management systems? Or C, logistical and regulatory challenges make it difficult for the market to recover after a disruption? The correct answer is B. The market does not recognize and reward manufacturers for mature quality management systems. So we're very near the end of my talk, and I'd like to summarize what I hope are your key takeaways. Current research indicates that quality metrics and quality culture programs are good business practices and important elements of modern pharmaceutical manufacturing. Both strong quality metrics and quality culture programs are part of quality management maturity. The Office of Quality Surveillance continues to engage stakeholders and support related academic research. Our goal is to keep all sites in compliance and all products available for the patient. The Office of Quality Surveillance monitors the state of quality for sites and products to assure every dose is safe and effective, free of contamination and defects, and patients can be confident in their next dose. I welcome the opportunity to address any of your questions during our upcoming panel discussion.
Thank you all for the great presentations. We'll now commence into our final Q&A panel. If you haven't had a chance to enter your questions into the Q&A chat pod, please do so now. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. Looks like we have questions coming in right now, and the first group of questions will be directed to Brian Hasselbalch. And here's the first question. Is China one of these groups, and will an audit by China FDA be accepted?
Thank you for that question. The China FDA or National Regulatory Authority is not now a partner under a mutual recognition agreement. And as I think I mentioned in the presentation, I'm not able now to list or identify any possible future partners, but be assured that to the extent we continue to find the MRA with the EU and with the UK successful and helpful in undertaking our regulatory responsibilities for quality, we'll pursue those arrangements in the future particularly once our travel is freed up a bit and we can visit other regulators as part of assessing a regulatory body or agency as competent or capable by FDA standards requires, or has at least in the past required on-site evaluation and discussions. So look forward to that in the future. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have a question regarding the poll survey results. And here's the question. Brian, 78% of the poll responders say they want to see harmonization in application-specific inspections and evaluations. When can industry expect that to happen?
Thank you. Great. It's a great finding. 78%. Wow. Can you please show that the poll results on the screen? It's cut off by my view. Thank you. Drag it down a bit. The fourth one that we want to show, which is the application specific. Let me just define, in case anyone was confused. That would be a pre-approval type inspection. That is an inspection at a facility to cover an operation or the facility at large due to something described in a pending application. Could be an original, could be a supplement. And so we call that a pre-approval, or in the case of a biologic and the facility is to be licensed, a pre-licensing inspection. And so, yes, I'm hearing the message, and I'll share this with my colleagues. 78% of those responding are eager to see us develop harmonization or regulatory reliance in that area. We have that as an element to the FDA EU and FDA UK MRAs, so it's an option for us, and we were working with the EU diligently up until travel became restricted. And for other priorities, we both agreed just to set aside temporarily working on mutual reliance or mutual recognition in the area of pre-approval inspections under the existing MRAs. So look for us to pick that back up as soon as, again, time permits, and we can focus on some other things. I'll just point out, though, many of you may know this already, but for those that don't, routine surveillance inspections are influential to OPQ in its assessment of manufacturing operations and facilities. So that information can be used in lieu of a pre-approval inspection and sometimes has satisfied our information needs in making a decision about a pending application. So even though we don't quite have an agreement with Europe or UK yet on performing specific pre-approval inspections for one another to our respective standards, we still rely on the information generated during surveillance and other kinds of inspections at a facility to see if it is useful in helping us evaluate a pending application. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Brian. Here's the question. As regulators are collaborating, do we foresee a single inspection of facility that's acceptable by different health agencies? This will also help save time for regulators.
Sure, a very common question. And I know typically manufacturers would like to see a single inspection from any one regulator worldwide that would satisfy all. We're not quite there yet. And although the Pharmaceutical Inspection Cooperation Scheme, of which FDA is a member, as I mentioned in my presentation, and which has over 50 members, is striving toward that goal or that state of normalization and harmonization among inspectorates. Time will tell, but hard to say when that will happen. There, of course, are times when a drug and or drug device product has specific requirements in a nation that doesn't exist elsewhere, and or different uses and risks to patients or consumers or the healthcare system in a country for which demands special coverage
or perhaps timely or urgent coverage that the home country just isn't able to provide. And so I would expect regulators to, from time to time, have a need to travel, even in MRI partner countries, to do inspections that meet their specific needs and timeframes and interests. So thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. We had one more question that just came in from Brian. Here's the question. Could you elaborate more on the EMA collaboration for medically necessary drugs? What is the goal, and is there a list of what's medically necessary?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I would appreciate, given the poll question response, there'd be a lot of interest in how we collaborate on application assessments. And that is a novel program. Looks very promising and interesting. And the way to follow that and to get the latest updates is simply to follow our website. The EMA and FDA will announce, as we have this past year, updates and how that's progressing. And I don't want to anticipate that today. I can't do that. I'm sorry. But look forward to some progress, hopefully in the near future, and that will be announced by our respective authorities. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that group of questions. The next group of questions will be directed to Francis. And here's the first question. Can you comment on the regulatory discretions that were applied during the pandemic? Will FDA go back and again look into these product applications once the pandemic is history?
Sure. So thank you for the question. So first off, we don't grant regulatory discretions to approve applications. What we have granted reg discretion for is basically to allow for the distribution of whether it's an unapproved or adulterated drug balanced with particular controls. So while the question is asking, do we need to go back and revisit or revoke reg discretions, the answer is typically we don't need to. And this is because our regulatory discretions are either lot specific or they're time based, and they have expiry periods usually of several months. So all of our reg discretions, whether COVID-19 related or not COVID-19 related, they tend to end on their own either when a lot is used up or after a few months. They can be extended if need be, but they aren't granted in perpetuity or open-ended that they needed to be pulled back later. But we do monitor when reg discretions sunset and see if we need to extend them in concert with our colleagues in drug shortages, or if they need to just, end accordingly.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Francis. It's a little bit longer one, and here it is. How certain is FDA that the adulterated hand sanitizers actually used ethanol, which was adulterated with methanol, as opposed to the hand sanitizer manufacturers substituting methanol in place of ethanol in the hand sanitizer formulation itself? It appeared that the adulteration done by the hand sanitizer manufacturer was more than the main problem, not that the ethanol itself was adulterated with methanol by the ethanol manufacturer.
Sure, very good question. It's one that we looked into early on as we were evaluating the substitution we were seeing in the hand sanitizer space. We did actually see one case of a finished hand sanitizer manufacturer that used the wrong ingredient. They were using 2-propanol instead of IPA, and they were doing it intentionally because they didn't know that 2-propanol was an unacceptable ingredient. However, when it comes to methanol for ethanol substitution, the cases that we encountered appeared to be happening at the API level. And this is based on several things. One is we interacted with the myriad of firms that we put on import alert, where we, first off, we stopped their drugs from entering the United States. We asked them to recall, but then we started asking them for information related to where they were getting their materials, et cetera. And we obtained C of A's, test results, et cetera, that really showed that it appears that the substitution was happening at the API level, where there were nefarious folks that were going around and taking methanol, creating C of A, saying ethanol, and then selling it on the open market. And this information, coupled with other information related to the economics of the ethanol markets, make us pretty confident that the substitution was occurring at the API level. This is also consistent, sadly, with other cases of historical substitution, in that if you look at heparin with OSCS or DEG and glycerin, those economically motivated adulterations or substitutions also were occurring at the API or the drug component level.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Francis. Can you advise on the processes OMQ uses to select samples for analysis?
Sure. So there's multiple pathways that will result in FDA conducting sample analysis. In some cases, OMQ may have a particular concern, whether it's from an inspection or a complaint, where we request a targeted sampling, whether it's obtaining material on the open market or going to get the material directly from a manufacturer. Sometimes it's based on region. We were working with our colleagues in ORA imports, and that's where once we started seeing particular issues with hand sanitizers from Mexico, the volume of sampling and the screening criteria increased proportionally. And other times it's actually conducted by other parts of FDA. The surveillance sampling, which is coordinated by Jennifer Maguire's office in OPQ, actually has a surveillance sampling program that has multiple facets to it. But if any of those samples do encounter a violative result, they'll refer it to OMQ for follow-up and potential regulatory action. So long story short, we may do some selection on our own based on information that we have, but we will also receive sample results from various other parts of the agency when they find violative results and they want to refer it to us.
Thank you for responding to that question. Looks like we have one more question that came in for Francis, and here's the question. Are regulatory meetings taking place in person or remotely?
Good question. So prior to the pandemic, they were both in person and remotely. Many of the times we wanted to have regulatory meetings face-to-face with firms. A lot of times, though, they would be face-to-face with some members of a company, and we would have plant personnel from anywhere in the world calling in on the phone. During the pandemic, obviously with the travel restrictions being in place, we've moved all of our regulatory meetings to telephone or virtual, and they remain so for the time being.
Thank you for responding to that question. We'll next move over to Jennifer Maguire. And we have a few questions coming in. And here's the first question. How do the program areas in the domestic pilot connect to the pillars in the foreign pilot? Will reports on these pilots as well as details of the pilots themselves be shared?
Okay, thank you for that question. So I'll start with the second question first. We definitely do plan to share our learnings from the pilot, from the podium. So we're very early in our journey to develop a QMM program. So it'll take a while until there's things worth sharing, but certainly we will share our experience about the pilot program. With respect to the topic areas and the pillars, I think it goes back to the umbrella slide from my presentation where I had the concept that quality management maturity is an umbrella program, and there's a number of topic areas underneath. So the different contractors just chose to group some of these topics differently. And one contractor referred to them as pillars, and they identified a certain number of them. The other contractor chose to call them practice areas or program areas, and identified a couple that they were focusing on. In the future, we'll have one terminology, one framework, and the agency will be able to pull from what the contractors have done and decide how we want to group all the different concepts on that umbrella slide into a finite number of areas where the topics are complementary, just to facilitate the way that we conduct the assessment. So thank you for that question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We have another question for Jennifer. Is there a regulatory benefit to the firm for QMM?
Great question. At some point, we do intend to have incentives for companies that participate in quality management maturity. We are looking at this as a voluntary program, so we hope that there will be incentives for participation. But I would say even now, if companies are following what we're doing with quality management maturity, and they're really driving towards good quality management practices and focusing on continual improvement, then it's more likely that they'll achieve this concept of sustainable compliance. And it's also more likely that these companies will be able to benefit from things like ICHQ 12 and regulatory flexibility. So I would say that both of those are very strong regulatory benefits. So thank you for that question.
Thank you for responding to that question. Looks like we have another question for Jennifer, and here's the question. Is the immense increase in the number of drug manufacturers related to all of the new hand sanitizer manufacturers, or where do these facilities come from?
Hi, great question. Yes, those the increase in the inventory of a couple thousand is actually tied to the new registrants that came in and registered and listed specifically to manufacture hand sanitizer. And so we'll see as the pandemic resolves how many of those stay in the market to manufacture hand sanitizer and how many of those exit the market, but that is in fact the reason for the big jump. Thank you for that question.
Thank you for responding to that question. Looks like we have another question that just came in for Jennifer, and here it is. Is FDA expecting to see QM embedded into the NDA in the near future, for example, in 2023 to 24?
So that's an interesting question. I don't think that we will collect metrics through the application process. When we do collect metrics in the future, it'll be through a standalone portal that facilitates the collection of the information in a structured format that will then facilitate our ability to use the data. So it won't be through the application itself, it'll be something else. And then as far as the time frame, I wouldn't be able to comment on an exact time frame just yet, but thank you for that question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We just had another question come in for Jennifer. Does your office notify manufacturers when you have sampled their products for analysis?
Question. So obviously if the field collects the sample while they're on inspection, or even separately from an inspection, if they arrive at a site to collect the sample, then the company would know that we were sampling some of their products. We do have other means of sampling, so we can do import sampling, we can do direct buys or from distributors. And so in some cases, the manufacturer may not know that we have sampled and tested their product. And they might not know until they're potentially violative, and then we engage with them. So sometimes yes, and sometimes no. But thank you for that question.
Thank you for responding to that question. We're going to move back over to Brian Hasselbalch, and we have a question that just came in for him. And here's the question. What will it be like after the pandemic? Is it still virtual or face-to-face?
Oh, yes. I love these kinds of questions. You're asking me to predict what will happen in the future. And as much as I would like to be able to do that, I can't, of course, reliably, so let me qualify it. I think that many have found remote evaluations to be effective. And certainly not for every situation or necessarily for every program of inspection performed by CDER or sponsored by CDER and performed by ORA. So a lot will depend on perceived successes and challenges associated with remote evaluations, both records requests under the statute or outside the statute, or remote evaluations, which is, we said in our guidance, are voluntary arrangements. I think that if you look back over time, as with any new tool used, it often gets integrated into our regulatory system. It becomes part of how we manage our responsibilities. And I think to some extent, industry's experience in interacting with FDA remotely versus on site will also be influential, and what our partners do around the world will also influence that decision. So I would expect to see us continue using remote evaluations in some way, whether records and or live interactions to evaluate systems or records remotely. In addition to, of course, continued inspections, which are very important to gain confidence and the assurance that we need. Thank you.
Thank you for responding to that question. Looks like we have just a couple minutes left, and we're going to have one last question to Brian, and here's the question that just came in. Why does FDA review MRA partner inspections reports instead of relying on only EU GMP certificate?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Appreciate it being asked. We individually, both the FDA and our partners, rely on the facts obtained from an inspection. And although the impact of different enforcement actions will be similar between FDA and its partners, because we have different legal systems and enforcement tools, we still have come to appreciate relying on the same set of facts. We also use that information, as you've heard Jennifer talk about and others from OBQ talk about. We also use information that is detailed in inspection reports, even those for surveillance purposes, to evaluate beyond the facility and its products or drugs, beyond just evaluating or assessing that one inspection event. So that information becomes knowledge that we use and can be credited toward other decisions and evaluations we make in FDA, and that includes a pending application. So as I said earlier, if a surveillance inspection is accessible, relevant, and it bears on something we want to look at in more detail connected with a pending application, it may very well satisfy our information needs, preclude the need for a pre-approval inspection at a facility, simply because we've had access to and reviewed a counterpart's inspection report. So the information has value beyond just classifying, if you will, that one inspection event at that one moment in time. So that's a big reason why we don't rely on the certificates alone. The certificates are very brief and decisional rather than informational. And I would just add that our legal authority requires a review of inspection findings to support certain types of actions that we want to take. Francis talked about the actions they take. Certainly a judicially mediated action is going to want to depend on facts, and it should be facts refereed by FDA to ensure that they represent real violations of our laws and are of concern enough that we want to take regulatory action. So that's something we can only do by looking at the details in a report rather than just looking at a certificate. Thank you for that question.
Looks like we're about out of time. We have time for just about one more question. This will go to Francis Godwin, and here is the question. After the hand sanitizer temporary guidance documents are withdrawn on 12/31/21, what manufacturing operations must be completed by 12/31, and what can continue after 12/31?
Very good question. So
if you're a hand sanitizer manufacturer that's operating under the temporary policies, definitely go to FDA's website, which has Q&As regarding that question. But in high level terms, if you're a hand sanitizer manufacturer that's manufacturing the API or the hand sanitizer itself, and this includes repackaging and relabeling operations, if you're operating under the temporary policies, that must end by December 31st. So, for instance, if you're manufacturing a 55-gallon drum of hand sanitizer on December 30th, that's fine. And it gets repackaged into consumer containers on December 31st, that is fine. However, they could not be put into individual containers on January 1st after the temporary policies have ceased to be in effect. However, any hand sanitizer that is manufactured up through December 31st can still be distributed from the manufacturers through March 31st. So basically, the manufacturing operations, including repacking and relabeling, have to wrap up by the end of the calendar year, and then there's a 3-month period where that material can be distributed from those manufacturers into the market.
Well, that's all the time we have for questions. A huge thank you to all of our presenters for the great presentations and answering numerous questions that came in.